A few weeks ago, I talked about the transgender issue, and I mentioned that there are two different paths that you can take when discussing this issue. The first path is that there are some people who are genuinely suffering with a mental illness, such as gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria. The second path is that some people are using the acceptance of transgenderism in our society to gain an advantage over other people. Particularly in the case of men trying to transition into women and then dominating women's sports. Leah Thomas as an example. But one thing I will say about the whole Leah Thomas thing is that Leah Thomas, he's an adult. And there's an argument to be had as to whether or not adults or people and just in general should be able to do this. And it's like, look, if you're an adult, people will say, well, it's his body. He can do whatever he wants. Fine. I mean, if you want to completely change your lifestyle and do irreversible damage, then you know what? If you're an adult, go for it, man. Like, seriously. But the most important part of this discussion, and also the most sinister part of this discussion, is to what extent should children be able to decide like their sex and their gender, and how much freedom should they be given in this area? And it is by no mistake that the left has targeted children with this issue. It is no mistake that there is an intensified focus on children when it comes to the transgender argument. And that is because that most of the pushback, a lot of the pushback that is going against transgenderism, it's coming from older people, right? And I'm not necessarily saying like people in their 60s and 70s, but I'm saying like it's adults, it's a past generation that is fighting against all of these things. So the idea is, and they're not stupid about this. So the idea is that they can brainwash and indoctrinate the younger generation. So 20 or 30 years from now, there will be no debate, there will be no discussion that being non-binary and mutilating yourself and becoming transgender, that is not only okay, but also the best way of living. Okay, it's by no mistake that our children are being focused, that our children are being attacked in this way. And there is a question, there are so many questions, but one of the questions is, whose responsibility is it to protect the children? Well, I would say that first and foremost, it's the parents. It's the parents' responsibility to protect the children. So if it's Hollywood or social media, or if it's the public school system who is encouraging all these things and applauding all of these things, it needs to be the parent, first and foremost, who is protecting their child. And the reason why things have gotten as bad as they have gotten is because parents have gravitated towards this and used it as a way. They are virtue signaling through their kids. Because their son will wake up one day and he'll try on his older sister's dress and he's like, oh, this is funny. And then his parents take that as an indication that he is actually a girl trapped in a boy's body. And so they then groom him to embody that, right? The reason why they are targeting children is because they cannot fight back. Particularly young children, they don't understand context, right? They don't understand the context of different situations. That's why you see pictures of adults unmasked in public schools and then the children still masked, even though the children are at less risk from COVID than the adults. And that is because the children don't understand the context of it. They don't look at their teacher and go, she's unmasked and I'm masked. Oh, well, that's bullcrap. I shouldn't be doing this. No, they are under the thumb of all these adults who want to use them, all these parents who want to use their own children to virtue signal their own greatness, their own political correctness. Right? It is not necessarily a matter of, in the case of very small children, it is not necessarily a matter of mental illness. It is very much a matter of people indoctrinating them, people grooming them, people telling them what to do, people telling them how to act. Because a young person, a young child, is easier to control, corrupt, confuse than an adult. So again, it should be the parents who are standing up against all of these things. And there are parents who are standing up against these things. You can see it in the battles going on in the public schools, where people are against this ideology being taught to their young children and they want it stopped. But again, there's also parents who have embraced this and used their children to promote this ideology. And I believe first and foremost that it is the parents who hold the majority of responsibility when it comes to teaching their children and educating their children and protecting their children. Obviously, it should be the primary responsibility of an adult parent. But it is getting to the point now where everybody is involved in pushing this, right? At what point, how much power is society going to have in educating and brainwashing our children, right? Because everybody's in on this now. You got Hollywood and social media and Disney and in celebrities and all of these different corporations, public school system, colleges, all of these people, all of these corporations, all of these institutions are trying to implement this and encourage this kind of behavior. And it's hard for me not to look at it and say that some people, other than the parents, right? Again, it's primarily the parents' responsibility to protect their children. But there is a part of me that believes that to some extent, we are going to have to hold other people accountable and parts of society accountable for this, right? Because it expands much further than just what children are learning at home. They are learning these things at every level of society. And it's hard for me not to look at celebrities who are encouraging this behavior and say, you are part of the problem. When you are encouraging young children to change their development, stunt their development, take part in very psychologically destructive behavior. Okay, it's not just the parents' fault for not protecting their children enough, but it's also the fault of these people who are encouraging it. To think that they're not going to bear any of the blame is ridiculous to me, because this is what's going on. There's an article in The Guardian by Matthew Cantor, and it's talking about a specific celebrity, Ariana Grande, who is reaching out a hand towards trans youth and funding some of these things. Okay, so the article says, quote, on International Transgender Day of Visibility, Ariana Grande is using her star power to rally her millions of fans to support trans youth. In an Instagram post on Thursday, the pop star announced the Protect and Defend Trans Youth Fund, which she founded with the fundraising platform Pledge. And her post said, quote, right now there are hundreds of disgraceful bills pending in state legislature that target trans youth and aim to curb their rights. Grande wrote in the post to her 302 million followers, saying the project would provide critical funds to organizations providing direct services and advocating for the rights of trans youth. Now I just want to point out the word use here, right? Because you take the first part, right? Right now there are hundreds of disgraceful bills pending in state legislature that target trans youth. Okay, it makes it sound like that the governors and the people who are making these decisions about these bills, it makes it sound like that, if your child is transgender, that they're going to show up and throw them in a van and, take them away and detain them or whatever it is. they're saying it to make it sound like trans youths are being victimized, and they are being victimized. But it's not by people who are fighting against transgenderism. It's by the people who are promoting transgenderism. And these bills that she is talking about, a lot of them have to do with protecting women's sports, not letting young children be indoctrinated in public schools. Okay, it's not about hindering people's rights, and I'll get to the rights part in just a second. It's not necessarily about hindering people's rights. It's about protecting children and protecting women. Okay, so don't be confused by the wordplay here. And now about the rights. State legislature that target trans youth and aim to curb their rights. Okay, so obviously children have rights, okay? Not as many rights as an adult, but they do have rights, right? They have the right to feel safe. They have the right to not be abused. They have, we know this. Children do have rights, not as many as adults, but they do have rights. Okay, but we also know, and this is a very simple concept, that there are laws in place that are meant to protect children, and they are meant to protect them from certain responsibilities that they are not yet able to handle until they come of age. You cannot, at least in the state, you cannot buy a firearm, you cannot own a firearm, cannot purchase a firearm until you're 21. You cannot drink until you're 21. You cannot drive till you're 15 or 16. You can't join the army until you're 18. There are reasons for this. There are reasons that there are laws in place, and that is to be sure that children have the opportunity to develop into young adults or adults before they make dangerous, life-changing, and critical decisions. Okay, and of all the rights I just mentioned, drinking, firearms, driving, going into the military, none of those things are as fundamental to a child's development as understanding basic biology and understanding what they are. Okay, understanding that there are only two sexes, that there are only men and women, and you can either be one of the two, is one of the most fundamental truths. And if you deny them this fundamental truth, not only does it confuse them in the start of their life, it also destabilizes everything else they try and put on that foundation. Okay, these people that are trying to convince you, and more importantly, convince your children that this is okay, it is abuse. It is child abuse. Okay, it's the reason we're in this spot is because we kept on sugarcoating it, we kept on overlooking it, we kept on taking it for granted. We weren't giving it as much thought or as much criticism as we should have. This is child abuse. Okay, if 30 years from now all of our children are brainwashed and they believe that all of this is okay, it's still abuse. It is still wrong. It is still horrifying. It is still evil. It is evil. If you are putting hormone blockers in your child to stunt their growth, to stunt their physical development, and therefore stunting their psychological development, you are a child abuser. You're not a hero. You're not an activist. You're an abuser.